It's no wonder that bottle ovens now symbolize the history of the potteries. For more than 200 years, they were the focus of pottery manufacture here in Stoke-on-Trent. Known as bottle ovens because of their shape, these brick structures dominated the skyline right up until the 1960s, when some 2,000 still existed in the city. Up to 80 feet high, no two were exactly alike. Bottle ovens consisted of two separate parts: an outer bottle-shaped shell, known as a hovel, and an inner oven where the pottery was fired. Small pottery factories made do with a single oven. The largest firms had a dozen or more. Gladstone was about average, with 4 bottle ovens. Let's take a look at how Gladstone's ovens were used. Once the pottery was formed and dried, it was ready for the first firing, known as biscuit firing, in one of Gladstone's 2 biscuit ovens. Having 2 of these ovens meant that one could be filled while the other was fired. Before firing, the pottery was placed in saggers to protect it from the fierce heat, smoke, and ash of the firing. Plates and saucers were bedded into the saggers with layers of powdered flint or alumina between them to prevent them bending in the heat. Cups and bowls were stacked on a single layer of flint lining the base of the sagger. Filling the oven was heavy work. Gladstone's biscuit ovens held over 2,000 saggers, containing up to 40,000 separate items of pottery. A team of placers carried the saggers on their heads through the low oven doorway, known as the clamins, and then carefully placed the saggers in stacks called bungs. They used to put rolled-up old silk stockings in the shape of a donut on their heads to help balance the saggers and to soften the load. A filled sagger weighed around 25 kilos. Each placer would go in and out of the oven several hundred times until the oven was full. The cod placer was in charge of the placers. He made sure that the ware was arranged in the best possible way for firing. In charge of the firing was the fireman. He was one of the most important people in the factory. The success of the firing depended on his skills. In the 19th century, clay workers were only paid for items that were good from oven, ones that could be used by the factory. A failed firing, a bad oven, and the pottery had to be thrown away. Several bad firings could even mean bankruptcy, with all jobs lost, so the fireman had great responsibility. Once the oven was full, the clamins, the doorway, was bricked up, and the coal fires were lit in the fire mouths. The fires were stoked regularly, every 2 hours at first, then every 3 hours as the oven warmed up. The fireman stayed with his oven, controlling the process for the 2 or 3 days it took to fire, and checking the progress of the firing at regular intervals.
Work was very hard. Well, you can imagine. We were doing 3 biscuit ovens a fortnight and 10 glass ovens a fortnight at that time, which was quite a lot of work, as you'd imagine.
Eventually, the oven reached the required temperature, around 1250 degrees centigrade for a bone china biscuit firing. That's 5 times hotter than a domestic oven. This high temperature was maintained for many hours. The firing process took about 2.5 days and 10 to 15 tons of coal. Then the oven was left to cool. Emptying was known as drawing an oven. It was regarded as the worst job in the factory, carrying the heavy saggers out of the hot, dark oven. The task took about 5 hours. The biscuit-fired pottery was then dipped in a glaze to make it waterproof, and the firing process started again. For this second or glossed firing, The pottery was separated inside the sagger by supports to prevent the items from fusing together as the glaze melted. Glossed firing was at a lower temperature, about 1,000 degrees centigrade for bone china. After the pottery had been decorated, it was fired again. Known as enamel firing, this was only to a temperature of 700 to 850 degrees centigrade. Despite their use for over 200 years, bottle ovens had several major disadvantages. For one thing, they were highly inefficient. Only 2% of the energy actually heated the pottery. The rest was wasted. It heated the saggers, the brickwork, and the air outside. Bottle ovens also caused life-threatening conditions. Emptying the hot ovens in the dark resulted in serious accidents, particularly burns. Extreme high temperatures caused eye disease and even blindness. Going from hot oven to cold workshops affected the heart, and the soot, fumes, dust and heat damaged the lungs. The coal fires affected not just the pottery workers, but virtually everyone living in the potteries. The air was often thick with smoke and choking to breathe.
If the atmosphere was damp, you couldn't see hand in front of you, because the dampness would hold the smoke down and wouldn't let it go up.
Although some firms started to use gas and electric ovens from the 1920s onwards, it was the Clean Air Act of 1956 that finally obliged the remaining factories to change. Within 10 years, most of the bottle ovens had been demolished to create space for the new gas and electric ovens. Today's ovens are clean, safe, and energy efficient. No longer are the distinctive bottle ovens a dominating feature of the North Staffordshire skyline. Relatively few remain. Gladstone's 4 bottle ovens were fired for the last time in 1960. The very last bottle oven firing in the city took place in 1978, organized by the Gladstone Pottery Museum. Bottle ovens are a symbol of the history of the potteries. They are preserved here at Gladstone as a valuable reminder of our past, a reminder of the way of life of the North Staffordshire pottery.